Hey guys, tonight we're stepping quietly through the front door of a house that looks absolutely charming from the street and smells, on the inside, like a coal fire got into a fistfight with a chamber pot. Welcome to the Victorian home. Not the tidy period drama version with the swelling violins, the spotless lace, and everyone gazing meaningfully across candlelit rooms. No, tonight we're talking about the real thing. The damp, the soot, the arsenic in the wallpaper, and the small army of exhausted servants keeping the whole illusion upright. Before you get too comfortable, a huge and sincere thank you to the lovely listener who suggested tonight's topic. You're the reason this channel keeps finding new corners of history to poke around in, and I mean that. If you enjoy these late-night wanders through the past, feel free to like the video and subscribe, but only if you actually enjoy what I do here. Drop a comment telling me where you're listening from and what time it is for you. It's somehow always 2:30 in the morning somewhere, and if you'd rather drift off with your eyes already closed, the channel is now on Spotify too, with a link waiting in the description. Now dim the lights, switch on a fan for that soft grey hum, and pull the blankets up because the house we're visiting is very cold and the central heating is one small man and a bucket of coal. Let's wonder for a moment. What actually went on behind those heavy Victorian doors? Did anyone in this house ever truly get clean? Or did they just relocate the dirt from one place to another? Could you survive a bedroom so cold your breath fogs above the pillow, in a bed you have to warm with a pan of hot coals like a human toasted sandwich? Would you last a single afternoon following the 10,000 unspoken rules of tea, where reaching for the wrong spoon could quietly end your entire social life? Could you sleep soundly knowing the beautiful green wallpaper was very slowly trying to kill you? And who, exactly, was up at 5 in the morning lighting the fires so the family could pretend the warmth had simply arrived on its own? Well, congratulations. You've just woken up in a narrow brick house in 1861. The fire went out hours ago, there's ice forming on the inside of the window pane, and somewhere below you a very tired girl is already on her knees scrubbing doorstep you will never once think to thank her for. Sleep well. Let's begin where every day begins, with you, awake, and immediately regretting it. Your bedroom in 1861 is a monument to discomfort. The fire in the little grate died sometime after midnight, and the room has since achieved a temperature best described as meat locker with wallpaper. There's a bloom of frost on the inside of the glass, delicate and lovely and a genuine health hazard. Your nose is cold, your ears are cold, the tip of every finger is cold. You'd love to leap out of bed and get moving, except the floorboards are somehow even colder than the air, and the moment your barefoot touches them, your soul briefly leaves your body. Welcome to the Victorian morning, where the first great achievement of the day is simply choosing to exist. Let's take stock of your surroundings since you're not going anywhere warm anytime soon. The bed itself is the one small mercy, a heavy nest of blankets, quilts, and a coverlet that together weigh roughly as much as a sleeping St. Bernard. Beneath you, if you're comfortable, is a horsehair or flock mattress that has compressed over the years into something with the yielding softness of a church pew. If you're wealthy, it's feathers, and it swallows you whole in a warm cloud you will resent leaving even more. The trouble isn't the bed. The trouble is the 6 feet of Arctic air between the bed and your clothes. Your breath rises above your face in little visible puffs, drifting up toward a ceiling you cannot see because it is still technically the middle of the night. Sunrise in an English winter is a rumour. Now consider the great Victorian irony. This is the wealthiest, most industrious empire the world has yet produced, an age of steam and steel and enormous confidence, and it still cannot reliably heat a single bedroom. There is no radiator ticking softly under the window. There is no thermostat you can prod with a resentful toe. There is a fireplace, and that fireplace is cold, and warming it is a project involving coal, kindling, patience, and another human being entirely. So you lie there, performing the ancient calculation known to every cold person in history. Exactly how badly do I need to get up, and can it wait? It cannot wait, because a bell is about to ring, or a child is about to cry, or your own bladder is filing an urgent complaint that a chamber pot at this temperature will not enjoy. So you steel yourself. You take the deep breath of a diver going off a high board, and you fling back the covers, releasing the one pocket of warmth you had painstakingly built with your own body heat over 8 hours, surrendering it instantly to a room that has been waiting all night to steal it back. The cold hits you like an accusation. Your skin puckers, your teeth consider chattering, and you hop across the floor in the peculiar high-kneed shuffle of someone trying to touch the ground as little as legally possible. Ever tried getting dressed while shivering so hard your own hands won't cooperate? You're about to. This is not a soft awakening into a gentle day. This is survival, dressed up in a nightgown, performed in a house that treats warmth as a luxury item rationed by the bucket. And the truly wonderful part, getting out of bed was the easy bit, because now you have to wash, and the water is somehow even colder than you are. Now it's time to freshen up, which sounds pleasant until you meet the washstand. In the corner sits a basin and a large ceramic jug, and the water inside that jug has been waiting there all night in a freezing room, patiently becoming as cold as it possibly can without turning to ice. There's no hot tap, no gentle steam, no soothing morning shower. There is a jug, a bowl, and your own dwindling courage. You splash the Arctic water onto your face, gasp like a landed fish, and dab yourself with a cloth in a ritual that removes approximately none of yesterday's grime, but does successfully wake you up through sheer shock. If you're wealthy, a servant hauled that water up 2 flights of stairs before you stirred. If you're not, that servant is you, and you're already tired. Let's admire the washstand properly, because the Victorians made it a whole event. It's a handsome little piece of furniture, often marble-topped, hosting a matching set. The jug, the basin, a soap dish, a toothbrush mug, and a smaller pitcher for good measure. The whole arrangement looks charming and civilized right up until you realize it exists precisely because the house has no bathroom. This is your bathroom. It is 3 feet wide. It lives in the corner of a bedroom, and its plumbing is a person carrying buckets up a staircase. The washing itself is less a bath and more a strategic negotiation with the parts of you that most need attention. You wet the cloth, you attack the face, the neck, the hands, perhaps the more diplomatically located regions, and you call it a triumph. Full immersion is out of the question, because full immersion requires a tub and roughly 40 gallons of heated water, and we'll get to that ordeal later in the week. For now, this daily rinse is what stands between you and smelling like the inside of a coal scuttle, and it is losing. Now let's talk teeth, since your mouth deserves the same misery as the rest of you. You've a bone-handled brush with bristles plucked from a pig, and a tin of tooth powder that tastes of chalk, soot, and faint regret. Some recipes fold in charcoal, some in cuttlefish bone, some in a startling dash of the same substances you'd otherwise use to scrub a floor. You scrub, you spit into the basin, and you try not to dwell on the fact that the dentist of this era views a toothbrush as delightfully optional, and a pair of pliers as the real solution. And the water, poor grey soldier, has now done its duty. It sits in the basin, cloudy and cold, faintly scummed, waiting to be carried away and flung out somewhere it can trouble you no further. Ever tried starting your day by pouring ice water on your own face on purpose? The Victorians did it every single morning, and they did it standing up, in a room with frost on the window, and then they went downstairs and behaved as though nothing had happened. There's a strange dignity to it, honestly. No steam, no comfort, no lingering, just a quick, brutal splash and onward. It's the sort of routine that builds character, mostly by removing any expectation that life will be pleasant before 9 in the morning. And now, freshly damp and thoroughly awake, you face the true engineering challenge of the Victorian day, putting on your clothes. With your face damp and your dignity questionable, it's time to get dressed, and dressing in the 1860s is not a task, it is a construction project. If you're a woman, you begin with the chemise, then the corset, laced snugly enough to improve your posture and remind you of your own ribcage. Over that go layers of petticoats, then a crinoline cage of hooped steel that turns your lower half into a small mobile tent, and finally the dress itself. It can take a solid stretch of the morning, and it often takes 2 people. Contrary to the dramatic legends, no one is removing ribs, but you will be sitting very upright at breakfast whether you like it or not. Getting dressed here isn't vanity. It's an act of engineering, and you're both the builder and the building. Let's go layer by layer, because there are a great many of them, and each one has opinions. The chemise comes first, a plain linen or cotton shift that sits against your skin, and quietly does the job your absent deodorant cannot, soaking up sweat so the good dress above it survives another wearing. Then the corset, which the age genuinely believes is good for you, supporting the back, correcting the posture, and holding everything in the shape society has decided a body ought to be. It's not the torture device of legend, but it is firm, and once it's laced you breathe from the top of your lungs and sit like a woman who has swallowed a fence post. Then come the petticoats, plural, always plural, layered one over another for warmth and volume, and then the marvel of the age, the crinoline. This is a cage of flexible steel hoops that hold your skirts out in a vast graceful dome, replacing the 6 sweaty petticoats women used to suffer under. It's a genuine liberation, and also a hazard, because your skirt now extends a full arm's length in every direction. You will knock ornaments from tables, you will get stuck in doorways sideways like a ship trying a canal, and near an open fire that airy cage becomes a genuine danger, a fact the newspapers report with grim regularity. If you're a man, congratulations, your morning is faster and only mildly ridiculous. You've a linen shirt, a waistcoat, a jacket, trousers, and a collar so tall and starched it holds your chin at the permanent angle of a man smelling something disagreeable. The collar is detachable, which is convenient, and stiff enough to slice bread, which is not. A necktie or cravat knotted just so completes the effect. You look sober, respectable, and entirely unable to turn your head. The whole enterprise is governed by an iron rule. What you wear announces exactly who you are and how much you have. A gentleman does not lace his own boots if he can help it. A lady of standing cannot fasten her own dress, because the buttons run up the back in a long defiant row, placed there specifically to require a maid. Your clothing is a costume, a status report, and a small daily prison, all stitched together by someone who is up before you lighting the fire. Ever spent an hour dressing for a day of sitting quietly in a cold house? You're doing it now, upright and immaculate and faintly short of breath. And having assembled yourself into a respectable human, you now owe an enormous debt to the people who made it possible, so let's finally go and meet them. Before we go any further, let's talk about the people who made your morning possible, because they've been up for hours. The maid of all work rose around 5, in the dark, in the cold, and has already blacked the grates, laid the fires, boiled the water, and scrubbed the front step. In a modest household she might be the only servant, which means she is the cook, the cleaner, the laundress, and the firelighter, all bundled into one perpetually exhausted person. There is no clocking out and no weekend. She sleeps in a freezing attic or a cupboard off the kitchen, and she is often 14 years old. The Victorian home ran on invisible labour, performed by people the family barely noticed, the way you barely notice a light switch until it stops working. Let's follow her morning, since it's the reason yours was tolerable. She wakes in the dark to a room with no fire, splashes her own face with water even colder than yours, and dresses fast because the day will not wait. Downstairs, the range must be raked out, relaid and lit before anything else can happen, because until it burns there is no hot water, no breakfast, no anything. She kneels at each grate with a brush and a tin of black lead paste, polishing the iron to a shine, a filthy job that coats her hands and apron in soot she will carry all day. Then the front step, scrubbed on hands and knees in full view of the street, because a clean doorstep tells the neighbours this is a respectable house. This is the strange arithmetic of Victorian respectability. The family's comfort and status rest entirely on the labour of someone the family would prefer not to see or hear. She's meant to move through the house like a rumour, appearing where the work is, vanishing before you notice her. She uses the back stairs, the servants' passages, the doors cut discreetly into the panelling, all designed so the machinery of the household stays hidden, and the illusion of effortless ease is never broken. The hierarchy below stairs is its own little empire. In a grand house there's a butler, a housekeeper, a cook, footman, ladies' maids, housemaids, and at the very bottom the scullery maid, who scrubs the pots and rarely sees daylight. In a middling home there may be a cook and a housemaid and little more, and in the vast number of ordinary households there is just her, the maid of all work, doing the labour of 5 people for the wages of barely 1 room and board included, the board being plain and the room being cold. The pay is a handful of pounds a year, and the hours are simply all of them. She might get a half day on Sunday if the family is kind and the church-going is done. Otherwise she's on call from before dawn until after the last of you's gone to bed, summoned at any moment by a bell that jangles on a board in the kitchen, each bell labelled with a room, each ring a small demand she must answer at a run. Imagine a job with no evenings, no weekends, and a manager who can teleport you across the house by ringing a bell. That's the post. And yet, for a girl from a poor family, this is often the best option going. A roof, meals, and a place indoors, away from the mill or the factory or worse, so she scrubs and carries and climbs and keeps the whole beautiful fiction standing. The least you can do is remember she's there. The family, of course, mostly won't. Now back upstairs, one of her fires is finally catching, so let's go and stand near it. Let's talk about warmth, or the desperate ongoing pursuit of it. Every room worth heating has a small iron grate, and every grate demands coal, and coal demands work. Someone has to carry the scuttle, lay the kindling, coax the flame, and then feed the thing all day like a hungry sooty pet. The fire warms a radius of roughly 1 armchair. Step back 3 feet and you're in winter again. Coal dust settles on everything, the curtains, the mantel, your lungs, and the whole house takes on the faint gritty smell of a locomotive that moved indoors. You will spend a startling amount of your life either tending a fire, missing a fire, or resenting a fire. And yet without it you'd simply freeze, so you make your peace with the beast. Let's watch the fire being born, because it's more of a ritual than you'd think. First, the grate is cleared of yesterday's ashes, which are saved because Victorians waste nothing, and ash has a dozen uses. Then paper is twisted into knots, kindling is stacked in a little wooden wigwam, and the coal is added on top in careful lumps. A match is struck, or an ember is carried from a fire already going, and then comes the delicate art of the draught, the coaxing of air through the fire until the flames take hold. Done well, it catches in minutes. Done badly, it sulks, smokes, and fills the room with a grey haze while everyone pretends this is fine. Now understand the geography of Victorian heat, because it is deeply unfair. The fire throws its warmth forward in a narrow cone, roasting your shins if you stand close and abandoning your back entirely to the cold room behind you. This is why the age is obsessed with fire screens, draft excluders, and chairs with tall wingbacks, all designed to catch and hoard the heat before it escapes up the chimney, which is where most of it goes anyway. You will find yourself performing the eternal fireside rotisserie, turning slowly to toast each side in turn, warm in front, freezing behind, like a chicken with regrets. And the fire is greedy. It wants feeding all day long, lump by lump, and every one of those lumps had to be delivered to your cellar by a coalman, hauled up by a servant and carried room to room in a heavy scuttle. Coal is a serious household expense and a serious household labour, and in a home with fires in the parlour, the dining room, the bedrooms and the kitchen range, someone spends much of the day simply keeping them all alive. Then there's the mess, which is considerable and permanent. Coal produces soot, and soot goes everywhere, up the chimney if you're lucky, into the room if you're not, and out over the whole city to come drifting back through the windows as grime. It blackens the paintwork, greys the curtains, and settles into the fabric of the house, until dusting becomes a full-time war we'll come to shortly. Your lungs get a share too, which nobody's especially worried about yet. Ever kept a small hungry animal alive purely so it could warm 1 square yard of a large cold room? That's your relationship with the fire, and it's a codependent one. It demands, you provide, and in exchange it grudgingly keeps you from freezing to death while quietly filling your home with dirt. It is the beating, sooty, temperamental heart of the house, and you cannot live without it. And now that a fire is finally roaring somewhere respectable, it's time to sit near it and eat. So let's go to breakfast, where the food is plentiful and the kippers are watching you. Fire lit, body upright, you finally shuffle toward breakfast. If the household has means, the table groans with a peculiar Victorian abundance, kippers staring up at you with cooked reproach, kidneys, cold ham, boiled eggs, toast and pots of strong tea. The middle classes adored a hearty breakfast, partly for the nourishment and partly because a generous table quietly announced to everyone that you could afford one. If you're lower down the ladder, breakfast is bread and dripping and whatever tea leaves haven't been used 3 times already. Either way you eat quickly, because the day is long, the house is cold, and the kippers are getting no more charming with age. Let's survey the spread of a comfortable household, because it is a magnificent overcommitment to the morning. There's the kedgeree, a curried muddle of rice, fish, and egg brought home from the Empire. There are chops and cutlets, cold meats left from last night, potted things in little jars, and a fresh loaf beside a heavy crock of butter. There's marmalade, that great Victorian devotion, and toast made by holding bread on a fork at the very fire we just fought to light. It's less a meal than a buffet designed to prove a point, and the point is, this family's doing perfectly well, thank you for noticing. Now consider the tea, which is the true morning religion. It arrives strong, dark and hot, brewed properly in a warmed pot, and poured through a strainer into cups so thin you can nearly see the light through them. Tea is the fuel of the entire nation, drunk at every possible hour and treated with a reverence bordering on the spiritual. The family drinks it freely. The servants drink the second brew and then the third, wringing every last atom of flavour from leaves that have long since given up. Nothing is wasted, not even the tea leaves, which will end their days scattered on the carpet to help gather the dust before sweeping. The setting matters as much as the food. In a genteel home there's a morning room, sunnier and less formal than the dining room, where the family gathers to eat, read the newspaper, and open the post. Father commands the paper. The letters are sorted and read aloud or hoarded depending on their contents. There's a particular stillness to a Victorian breakfast, a sense of the day being loaded and cocked before it's fired, everyone fueling up for the long marathon of respectability ahead. For the poorer household, of course, the picture shrinks dramatically. Breakfast is bread, perhaps spread with dripping, the saved fat from a roast, salted and smeared and genuinely delicious in the way that only cheap food eaten by a hungry person can be. There might be porridge, thick and grey and filling. There is tea, always tea, weak and stretched but hot and reviving. It won't win any prizes, but it's warm and it's fuel, and on a freezing morning fuel is the whole of the ambition. Ever eaten an enormous fried breakfast at dawn purely to prove you could? The Victorian middle classes did it daily, and they did it beside a fish that had been smoked kippered and now stared up at them with the flat accusation of the recently deceased. You spear it, you eat it, and you tell yourself it's a fine start to the day, which it is, in the way that any hot food is a fine start when the window has ice on the inside. Fed at last, warm at last, you rise from the table. But the food didn't cook itself, and the warmth didn't happen by accident. Both came from downstairs, from the roaring, steaming, blackened engine room of the house. So let's go where the family almost never does and descend into the kitchen. Now let's descend into the kitchen, the roaring engine room hidden below the family's polished world. At its centre squats the cast-iron range, a black beast that must be lit before dawn, fed all day, and blacked and polished until it gleams, which is a filthy job that immediately makes the range dirty again. The heat is tremendous, the ventilation is theoretical, and the cook labours in a permanent haze of steam, smoke, and simmering resentment. Everything is done by hand. The plucking, the gutting, the kneading, the endless scrubbing of pots with sand and elbow grease. The kitchen is where the house is truly kept alive, and also where a great many people quietly ruin their backs, their hands, and their afternoons. Let's understand the range, because it rules this room like a tyrant. It's a great iron contraption combining an open fire, an oven, and a hot plate, and it is temperamental in the extreme. There's no dial to set the temperature. The cook judges the heat by holding a hand in the oven and counting how long she can bear it, a method that is exactly as scientific and as painful as it sounds. Get the fire too hot and the pastry burns, too cool and the joint won't roast. Managing this beast across a whole day of different dishes is a genuine skill, and a good cook is prized precisely because most people cannot do it without producing charcoal and tears. Now look at the tools, or rather the near-total absence of the ones you'd expect. There is no refrigerator, so the meat must be used quickly or preserved. There's no gas cooker in most homes, no electric anything, no gadget that does the work for you. There is a mincer if you're lucky, a mortar and pestle, a battery of knives, and above all there are hands. Cream is whipped by hand until the arm screams. Bread is kneaded by hand until the shoulders give out. Meat is pounded, fish is boned, vegetables are scrubbed and peeled and chopped in quantities that would stagger a modern cook, all by one or two people working from dawn. The washing up alone is an epic. Every pot is heavy iron or copper, and copper must be scoured with sand or a paste of salt and vinegar to keep it from turning your food a lovely shade of poison. The greasy water goes cold, the pile never shrinks, and the scullery maid, lowest of the low, stands at the sink with cracked, reddened hands working through a mountain of crockery that will be dirty again by evening. Ever done the dishes for a 12-course dinner using only sand, cold water and despair? Somewhere below stairs, a 14-year-old is doing exactly that right now, and it is hot, punishingly so, in a way the rest of the frozen house is not. The range pumps out heat all day, the coppers steam, the ovens roar, and in summer the kitchen becomes a genuine furnace where staff work in long sleeves and heavy aprons and sweat through every layer. The irony is exquisite. Upstairs the family shivers by their little grates, wrapped in shawls and complaining of the cold, while downstairs the people feeding them are half-cooked themselves, labouring in a climate closer to the tropics. The kitchen is also, quietly, the true centre of the home. The family may believe the house revolves around the parlour, but the parlour is a museum. The kitchen is where things actually happen, where the food is made, the water is heated, the gossip is exchanged, and the whole exhausting machinery of respectability is kept running. It is loud, hot, hazardous, and absolutely essential, and the people who rule it are far more powerful than the family will ever admit. Now let's climb back up to the polished world above, where everything looks lovely and calm. It's all a bit of a performance, and some of the loveliest touches are, it turns out, doing their best to poison you. Let's admire the wallpaper. Let's admire the decor for a moment, because it may be trying to kill you. That gorgeous, vivid green wallpaper, the rich emerald shade everyone adores, often gets its colour from Shields green or Paris green, pigments made with arsenic. In a warm, damp Victorian room, that paper can shed fine dust and, some believed, release a faint poisonous vapour, leaving families mysteriously ill in their own parlours. Headaches, stomach trouble, a general sense of wasting away in a beautifully decorated room. Nobody quite connected the dots for years. You could quite literally be poisoned by good taste. So go ahead, compliment the walls, but maybe don't lick them. Let's understand why green, of all colours, became the villain. For most of history, a truly vivid, stable green was maddeningly hard to produce. Then chemistry delivered a miracle, a compound of copper and arsenic that gave a green so rich, so alive, so gloriously saturated that the entire fashionable world lost its mind for it. This green went into everything. Wallpaper, yes, but also dress fabrics, artificial flowers, candles, children's toys, sweets, and the fake leaves worn in ladies' hair. An entire era decided that the most beautiful colour available was one built from a notorious poison, and then wrapped itself in it from head to foot. Now picture the parlour. The walls are papered in that luscious green. The room is kept warm by the fire and damp by the general moisture of a poorly ventilated house, and over the years the paper begins to break down. Some experts of the day argued it gave off a toxic gas in these conditions. Others pointed to the fine dust that flaked from it and drifted through the air to settle on every surface and into every lung. Either way, families in these rooms fell ill in ways no one could explain, growing weak, sick, and sallow, and mysteriously recovering when they left home for the seaside, only to wilt again on returning to their lovely green sanctuary. The victims were often the most vulnerable. Children in green-papered nurseries sickened. Workers who made the paper and the fabrics, especially the young women who dusted the poisonous pigment onto artificial flowers all day, suffered dreadfully, with sores, ulcers, and worse. There are grim accounts of the colour quite literally being the death of the people who handled it most, and still the fashion held because the green was beautiful and beauty, then as now has a way of silencing common sense. The debate raged for decades. Doctors wrote alarmed letters, newspapers ran uneasy stories, and yet plenty of respectable people, including some famous manufacturers of the very wallpaper in question, insisted loudly that it was all nonsense, that a bit of arsenic on the wall never hurt anyone, and that nervous householders should calm down. Ever been told the thing making you ill is perfectly safe by the man who sells it? The Victorians heard that reassurance a great deal, usually while feeling steadily worse in a very tasteful room. Slowly, sense won out. Manufacturers began advertising their papers as free from arsenic, which tells you everyone had finally understood the problem. Safer pigments arrived, tastes shifted, and the murderous green faded from fashion, taking its quiet body count with it into history. But in 1861 you're sitting in the thick of it, in a room decorated to impress the neighbours, breathing in the faint dust of a colour that is beautiful, admired, expensive, and slowly doing you harm. So enjoy the parlour, admire the emerald walls, the tasteful furnishings, the whole immaculate scene. Just don't get too attached, and certainly don't spend too long in there, which luckily no one is allowed to do anyway, because the parlour is the one room in the house you're absolutely forbidden to enjoy. Come now into the parlour, the finest room in the house, kept spotless and almost entirely unused. This is the shrine to respectability, stuffed with the good furniture, the framed photographs, the ornaments under little glass domes, and a suffocating quantity of patterned fabric on every surface. The family does not lounge here. The family performs here, on the rare occasions when visitors come to judge them. The rest of the time it sits cold, dark and immaculate, a museum exhibit of a life no one is actually living. You may look at the nice room, you may dust the nice room, you may not under any circumstances relax in the nice room. Let's take in the sheer density of stuff, because the Victorian parlour abhors a bare surface the way nature abhors a vacuum. Every table wears a cloth, and every cloth wears ornaments. There are vases, figurines, framed silhouettes, wax fruit under domes, dried flowers under other domes, stuffed birds under yet more domes, and a startling number of things that have been embroidered, tasselled, or fringed for no reason beyond the fear of empty space. The walls are crowded with pictures hung nearly to the ceiling. The mantel is a battlefield of clocks and candlesticks, and the whole effect is less a room to sit in than a very earnest collection to be admired. Each object is a small announcement. The piano says the daughters are accomplished. The books say the family reads, whether or not it does. The souvenirs and curios say someone has travelled, or at least knows someone who has. The photographs, that thrilling new marvel, say here is the family, respectable and posed, and slightly startled by the long exposure. The whole room is a carefully arranged argument for the family's status, taste, and moral soundness, assembled entirely for the benefit of visitors who might spend 20 minutes in it 3 times a year, and that is the great absurdity. This finest, costliest, most cared-for room in the entire house exists almost purely to be looked at by other people. The family spends its actual evenings in a smaller, shabbier sitting room where the furniture is comfortable and nobody minds a crumb. The parlour stays sealed like a tomb, curtains half drawn to keep the sun from fading the upholstery, fire unlit to save the coal, waiting in cold silence for the sound of a visitor's card at the door. The upkeep naturally falls to the servants, and it is relentless. All those ornaments must be lifted, dusted, and replaced daily, in the exact positions the mistress prefers, because a figurine an inch out of place is a small domestic crime. The fabrics gather dust with enthusiasm. The glass domes must be cleaned inside and out, ever cleaned, an entire room full of fragile treasures that no one is ever allowed to enjoy. That's the housemaid's regular fate, tending a shrine to a life the family only pretends to live in it. There's a quiet sadness under the splendour if you look. Here is warmth withheld, comfort denied, and a beautiful space held permanently hostage to the opinions of others. The best chairs are the ones no one sits in. The best room is the one no one uses. Respectability in the Victorian home means turning your finest possessions into a performance and then refusing to touch them, all for an audience that barely comes. So admire the parlour from the doorway, as you're meant to, and then back away quietly to somewhere you're actually permitted to breathe. And while you retreat, notice something drifting in the air, catching the thin light, settling gently on every one of those precious, untouchable ornaments. It's dust, and in this house, dust never ever stops. let's talk about the war. Speaking of dusting, let's talk about the great unwinnable battle of Victorian domestic life. With coal fires belching soot, gas lamps blackening ceilings, and horse traffic churning the streets outside into a fine airborne filth, dust doesn't just accumulate here, it invades relentlessly on all fronts. There is no vacuum cleaner. There is a brush, a cloth, a pan, and a human being on their knees, going after every carved chair leg and pleated curtain by hand. The rooms are packed with ornaments precisely so the family can display their status, which means each one must be lifted, wiped, and returned daily. You could clean this house from dawn to dusk, and by morning it would need cleaning again. It is Sisyphus, but with a feather duster. Let's meet the enemy properly, because it comes from every direction at once. From inside, the coal fires throw soot into every room, the gas lamps smear the ceilings, and the candles and oil lamps add their own greasy film. From outside, the great city is a machine for manufacturing filth. Thousands of chimneys, thousands of horses depositing thousands of contributions on the road, all of it dried and ground and lifted into the air to come sifting through the ill-fitting windows. Open a window for fresh air and you invite the grime in. Keep it shut and you stew in the smoke of your own fires. There is no winning move, only a choice of how you'd like to lose. Now look at the battlefield, which the family has thoughtfully made as difficult as possible. Every surface is crowded with ornaments, every window swagged in heavy curtains, every chair carved with grooves and every table skirted in cloth, all of it a magnificent trap for dust and a nightmare to clean. The maid works through it inch by inch, lifting each figurine, wiping each frame, beating the soot from the drapes, brushing the carpets on her knees with a stiff brush, scattering damp tea leaves first to catch the dust so it doesn't just billow up and resettle. She dusts from the top down so the fallout lands on surfaces not yet cleaned, a small tactical mercy in a hopeless campaign. The carpets are their own torment. There is no machine to suck them clean, so the loose rugs are dragged outside, hung over a line, and beaten with a cane until the dust flies off in choking clouds, an exhausting job that leaves the arms aching and the lungs full. The fitted carpets, which can't be lifted, are swept and brushed in place, and, once a year in a great upheaval called spring cleaning, taken up entirely, hauled out, beaten, and the floors beneath them scrubbed. Spring cleaning turns the whole house upside down for days, and everyone dreads it, especially the person doing it. And here's the cruelty at the heart of the war. It can never be won, only fought to a standstill each day and then lost again by morning. The fires that make the soot cannot be extinguished, because then you'd freeze. The lamps that blacken the ceiling cannot be doused, because then you'd sit in the dark. The very things that make the house livable are the same things that make it filthy. So the labour is truly endless, a fresh coat of grime settling gently over the whole, exhausting achievement of yesterday. Ever cleaned something spotless and watched it dirty itself again while you are still holding the cloth? That is the housemaid's entire life. So she fights on, cloth in hand, because a dusty house is a shameful house, and shame is not permitted. It is honest, aching, thankless work, performed in silence so the family need never think about it. And as the light begins to fail and the dusting is finally briefly done, a new task looms, one that will let a little more dirt into the air even as it pushes back the dark. It's time to light the lamps. As the afternoon dims, let's light the lamps and gently poison the air while we're at it. Gas lighting is the marvel of the age. A flick, a flame, and rooms glow far brighter than any candle managed. But this coal gas burns dirty. It blackens the ceilings, tarnishes the silver, wilts the houseplants, and gives off a faint sulphurous whiff that lingers in the curtains. It also devours the oxygen in a closed room, leaving guests inexplicably drowsy and headachy by the end of an evening. And should a jet be left running unlit, well, the results were occasionally dramatic and always memorable. Victorian progress often arrived like this: brilliant, convenient, and quietly hazardous to everyone standing near it. Let's appreciate first just how astonishing this all is, because it's easy to forget from a distance. For the whole of human history until roughly now, night meant darkness, held back only feebly by candles and oil lamps that guttered, smoked, and gave a weak, flickering pool of light barely fit to read by. Then came gas, piped into the very walls of the house, and suddenly a room could be lit brightly, steadily at the turn of a tap. Streets were lit, shops stayed open. The evening, once a slow surrender to the dark, became usable. To a Victorian, this is genuine wizardry, and they are rightly delighted by it. The delight comes with a price, of course, as delight so often does in this house. The gas is made from coal, and it burns with all the enthusiasm for filth that coal always shows. Above every lamp a dark smudge slowly spreads across the ceiling, so that ceilings must be repainted far more often than anyone would like. The gas attacks the metalwork, blackening the silver and dulling the gilt. It parches the air, dries the throat, and quietly murders any houseplant optimistic enough to share the room. Bookbindings crack, and the whole interior takes on a faint tarnished quality, as though the house itself is slowly being smoked like a kipper. Then there's the air you're actually breathing, which the flames are steadily eating. Each burning jet consumes oxygen and gives off its own fumes, and in a room sealed tight against the winter cold, with the curtains drawn and the door shut, the atmosphere grows thick and stale as the evening wears on. Guests grow heavy-eyed and headachy, and blame the wine or the hour, never suspecting the pretty lights hissing gently on the wall. Ever felt yourself wilting at a dinner party and assumed it was the company? It might well have been the lighting, quietly turning the room into a lidded pot. And the gas is not merely stuffy, it is genuinely dangerous. A tap left half open fills a room with an odourless, invisible threat, and a servant entering with a candle discovers the problem in the most spectacular way imaginable. Leaks seep through walls, faulty fittings hiss in the dark. The newspapers carry their steady, grim reports of explosions and asphyxiations. The small fine print of an era learning the hazards of its own cleverness in real time. One accident at a time, so the lamps are lit with care, the tapers touch to each jet, and the rooms bloom into a warm golden glow that would have seemed miraculous to anyone born a generation earlier. It's brighter, longer, and better than anything before it, and it's also slowly staining the ceiling, poisoning the air, and waiting for one careless hand to make the evening memorable. That's Victorian progress in a single hiss of flame. Now that we can see, let's attend to a matter the lamplight makes no prettier, the pressing question of exactly where everything in this house goes. Let's address a delicate matter. Where exactly does everything go? If you're fortunate and modern, your home has a water closet, a genuine flushing toilet, the pride of the household. If you're less fortunate, you have a privy out back over a cesspit, or a chamber pot under the bed that someone, hello again, the maid, must empty each morning. Even where flushing toilets exist, they often drain into overwhelmed sewers or leaking cesspits, so the smell has a way of wafting back up the pipes to say hello. The whole city of London reached such a fragrant crisis a few years before this that the summer became known simply as the Great Stink. Progress was coming, but in 1861 it was arriving one nose wrinkle at a time. Let's start with the humblest arrangement, the chamber pot, because most households still know it intimately. It lives under the bed or tucked in a cabinet, and it exists so that no one need brave the freezing journey outdoors in the small hours. You use it, you slide it back, and in the morning it must be carried down and emptied, a duty that falls inevitably to the servant. Multiply that by every bedroom in the house, and you begin to grasp a grim category of labour that the family simply never thinks about, performed before breakfast by someone holding their breath. Move up a rung and you reach the privy, an outdoor closet over a pit or a bucket, shared by the household and sometimes by several households at once. It's cold, it's dark, it's a long walk on a winter night, and the pit beneath must periodically be emptied by the night soil men, who do exactly the job that name implies, under cover of darkness, for wages you'd have to be desperate to accept. The whole system depends on these invisible men carting away what the city produces, and the city produces a very great deal. Now the marvel of the age, the water closet, the flushing toilet that the well-to-do household shows off with quiet pride. Turn the handle and water sweeps everything away, out of sight, out of mind, into the drains. It's clean, it's modern, it's genuinely a wonder. There's just one small problem. The drains it sweeps everything into were never built for this volume, and half of them empty into cesspits or straight into the river that the city also drinks from. So the flush that removes your problem simply relocates it downstream, where it becomes everyone's problem, including yours again by a longer route. The plumbing itself often turns traitor. Early fittings frequently lack a proper trap, that clever little bend of water that seals the pipe, so the household's brand new modern convenience becomes a direct open channel between the bedroom and the reeking sewer below. The smell drifts back up, faint and foul, and with it, though no one yet fully understands this, the seeds of real disease. Ever installed a shiny upgrade only to find it pipe the trouble straight back into your home? The Victorians did precisely that, with great enthusiasm and tremendous ceremony. This is the crisis that came to a head in the capital just before our story, when a blazing hot summer cooked the river into such an overpowering stench that Parliament itself, sitting right beside it, could barely function, and finally, gagging, agreed to fund a proper system of sewers. Relief was on its way, borne on miles of new brick tunnels. But it hadn't arrived yet, not here, not in this house, where the water closet gurgles proudly and the pipe beneath it whispers back, "Enough of that. Let's cleanse ourselves of the whole subject quite literally and turn to the closest thing this house offers to luxury, the great weekly labour of the bath." Now for the weekly extravaganza, the bath. There is no bathroom in most homes, so bathing means dragging a tin tub in front of the fire and filling it, bucket by heavy bucket, with water heated on the kitchen range. This is such an enormous labour that the whole family may share a single tubful in turn, from cleanest to grubbiest, which is the true origin of every "don't throw the baby out with the bathwater" joke you've ever half heard. By the time the last person climbs in, the water is tepid, grey, and no longer entirely committed to the concept of cleaning. Bathing here is not a soothing ritual, it is a monthly-ish event requiring planning, muscle, and a firm belief that it's worth it. Let's count the labour, because the labour is the whole point. Water must be pumped or carried, poured into coppers and kettles, heated over the range until it steams, then ferried bucketful by heavy bucketful across the house to the tin tub waiting by the fire. Each full bucket is a genuine burden, and a bath deep enough to sit in properly needs many of them. Then, when you're done, all that water must be bailed out again and carried away. For a single bath, someone hauls water up, and grey water down until their back is a monument to the whole enterprise, that someone is as ever the servant, or in a poorer home, everyone. Because of all that effort, the tub is a shared resource, filled once and used by the family in strict order of precedence. Father first, into the clean hot water, then the rest in descending rank, each climbing into a bath a little cooler and a little cloudier than the last, until the youngest or lowliest lowers themselves into a lukewarm grey soup that has already cleaned several other people. It is not glamorous. It is arithmetic, applied to hygiene, and it explains a great deal about why the Victorians did this so rarely, and relied so heavily on the daily cold splash at the washstand instead. This setting, at least, is the warmest spot the house can offer, right in front of the parlour or bedroom fire, screened off for a scrap of privacy. This matters enormously, because a bathroom would be a freezing room, and a bath in a freezing room is a punishment, not a pleasure. So the tub comes to the fire, and for a brief steaming interval you sit in hot water in a warm glow, which in this cold and difficult house is very nearly bliss, and worth every bucket that got you there. Now, the very wealthy are beginning to install fixed bathrooms with piped water and boilers and gleaming fittings, the shape of the comfortable future. But these are rare, expensive novelties, and even they often produce water more alarming than soothing, given the temperamental gas geysers that heat it, and occasionally announce their displeasure with a bang. For the ordinary household, the tin tub by the fire remains the whole of the ambition, dragged out, filled, shared, and emptied on bath night, and not a moment more often than necessary. Ever treated a hot bath as a rare civic event requiring the labour of the entire household? That's precisely what it is here. A small triumph of planning and muscle over cold and inconvenience, indulged in perhaps once a week if the household is diligent and cherished accordingly. You emerge pink, damp, and briefly clean, wrapped in a towel warmed at the fire, feeling like royalty and knowing full well it will be days before you feel this way again. Clean at last, let's go and inspect where the household's food is kept, because getting clean is one thing, and not being quietly poisoned by dinner is quite another. Let's raid the larder cautiously. With no refrigeration, food is kept cold in a stone-floored pantry, salted, smoked, potted under fat, or simply eaten before it can revolt. But the greater danger isn't spoilage, it's adulteration. Unscrupulous sellers stretch their goods with astonishing creativity. Alum whitening the bread, chalk brightening the milk, sand bulking the sugar, and lead compounds colouring the cheap sweets. You might sit down to a wholesome meal and consume a small chemistry set along with it. New laws were beginning to fight back against this, but in 1861, reading the ingredients meant squinting suspiciously at your loaf and hoping for the best. Let's tour the larder first, since keeping food edible without a refrigerator is a real feat. The pantry has a cold stone floor and a north-facing window with a mesh screen to let in cool air and keep out flies, and here the perishables sit in a state of managed decline. Meat hangs or rests under a cover. Milk and butter keep in the coolest corner and turn anyway with dispiriting speed in warm weather. To buy time, the household salts, smokes, and pickles with vigour, and pots meat and fish under a thick seal of fat, which keeps the air out and the contents just about safe. Everything is a race against rot, and the household is forever a step behind. But spoilage, at least, announces itself. You can smell the turned milk and see the greening meat. The sneakier menace is the food that looks perfect and has been quietly tampered with before it ever reached your kitchen, because a startling amount of what you buy has been stretched, faked, or brightened to fatten a seller's profit. This is the golden age of food adulteration, when the loaf on your table and the sugar in your bowl may contain a good deal that never grew in any field. Consider the catalogue, because it is genuinely alarming. Bread is whitened and bulked with alum and sometimes chalk or ground bone. Milk is watered down, then whitened back up with chalk to hide the crime, and thickened with who knows what. Tea leaves once used are dried, dyed, and sold again as new. coloured with substances no one should drink. Beer is stretched and doctored. Sweets, meant for children, are coloured with vivid pigments made from lead, copper, and yes, that murderous green arsenic we met upon the walls, so that a child's treat could carry a genuine dose of poison inside its cheerful colour. The reason this flourishes is simple. Nobody is checking. There is, as yet, no real system of inspection, no reliable way for an ordinary shopper to know what's in anything, and no meaningful punishment for the seller who cheats. It takes a determined few, chemists and campaigners, who begin actually testing what's on sale and publishing the horrifying results to force the matter into the open. Their findings shock the public, and the first proper laws against adulteration are only just beginning to appear, tentative and toothless, but a start. So in this house, in this year, safety comes down to judgment and suspicion. The careful mistress buys from sellers she trusts, learns the tricks of the trade, and eyes a suspiciously white loaf or an oddly bright sweet with the wariness it deserves. Ever bought something that looked perfect and wondered what they'd done to make it look that way? The Victorian shopper had to ask that question about nearly everything, every single day, and often never got a truthful answer. You eat anyway because you must, trusting to luck and a stern eye. And having survived the larder, let's turn to the day of the week that every servant in the land dreads above all others, the day the whole house fills with steam and misery. Let's talk about laundry. Let's talk about the most dreaded day of the week. Washing day, usually Monday, usually miserable. There is no machine. Laundry means boiling great coppers of water, scrubbing garments raw against a board, wrestling them through a mangle to squeeze the water out, and hanging the sodden results wherever they might dry, which in a damp climate is nowhere and never. Harsh soaps and lye strip the skin from the washerwoman's hands. Whites are boiled, blued and starched in a process so exhausting it consumes the entire day and often the next one for ironing. If you have ever grumbled at a laundry basket, spare a thought for the Victorian who faced this weekly with nothing but a tub, a mangle and grim determination. Let's walk through the ordeal from the start because it begins before dawn and does not let go. First, the great copper, a large fixed vat in the scullery, must be filled and its fire lit so the water can come to the boil. The dirty linen is sorted by colour and grubbiness, then soaked, then rubbed by hand against a ridged washboard with a bar of harsh soap, worked and wrung and worked again until the ingrained dirt of a week gives up. The whites are boiled in the copper, stirred with a great wooden stick called a dolly, or tossed up and down until the arms burn, because boiling is the only real weapon against stains in a world without modern detergent. Then comes the rinsing, and the water problem all over again, fresh cold water carried in and dirty water carried out, the linen plunged and swirled and lifted, streaming and impossibly heavy. To brighten the whites there's the curious ritual of the blue bag, a little pouch of blue dye swished through the final rinse, because a touch of blue tricks the eye into seeing a purer white, an old laundress's cleverness passed down through generations. Starch is boiled up separately, and the collars and cuffs and petticoats dipped in it, so they'll dry crisp and hold their proud stiff shape. Wringing the water out is a battle of its own. Sodden fabric weighs a ton, and it must be twisted by hand or fed through the mangle, that fearsome contraption of two heavy rollers turned by a crank that squeezes the water out and will just as happily squeeze a careless finger. Turn the handle, feed the cloth, catch it flattened and dripping on the other side, and repeat for a mountain of washing that never seems to shrink. It is heavy, wet, relentless work, and it soaks the worker as thoroughly as the wash. And then, the final insult in a damp and sunless climate, getting it dry. On a rare fine day the lines go up in the yard and the washing flaps in the breeze. On the far more common grey, wet, sooty day, The sodden laundry is draped indoors, over racks and hoisted on pulleys near the fire and across every available surface, so the whole house fills with clammy air and the smell of drying wool, while everyone edges around wet sheets for a day or more. Hang it outside in the city smoke and it may come in dirtier than it went out. Ever spent an entire day soaked to the elbows, hands raw from lye, wrestling wet sheets that outweigh you, only to face the ironing tomorrow? That is washing day, and it comes around every single week. And the poor washerwoman's hands are cracked and red and never quite recover before the next Monday demands them again. It is perhaps the hardest single day of domestic labour the era has to offer, and it is offered generously once a week, forever. Let's leave the steam behind and climb the stairs to a quieter, stranger corner of the house, where the children of the family live a small separate life of their own. Let's visit the nursery. Let's climb the stairs to the nursery, where the children of the house live in their own small kingdom, safely out of the way. In a family of means, the little ones are largely raised by a nanny or nursemaid, brought down to visit their parents for a scrubbed and tidy hour before being whisked back up again. The reigning philosophy is that children should be seen, occasionally, and heard almost never. Discipline is firm, affection is rationed, and the nursery diet leans heavily on bread, milk, and boiled things of no particular flavour. It's a strange, quiet world of routine and restraint, presided over by a woman who is quite often more of a parent than the parents are. Let's understand the geography first, because it tells you everything. The nursery sits at the top of the house, on the upper floors, deliberately far from the grand rooms where the adults live their adult lives. There the children eat, sleep, learn and play in their own suite of rooms, tended by nursery servants, and they descend into the main household only by invitation. The distance is the point. A well-run home keeps its children pleasantly out of earshot until they are wanted, presentable and quiet. At the centre of this small kingdom stands the nanny, and she is the true authority in the child's daily world. It is she who wakes them, washes them, dresses them, feeds them, teaches them their manners and their letters, comforts them when they wake in the night, and hears their small confessions and fears. The mother of the house may love her children dearly, but she often does not do these things. She visits them. The bond that forms in the nursery is frequently deepest, not with the parents at all, but with this hired woman who is present for everything the parents delegate away. The famous ritual of the era is the children's hour, when the little ones are scrubbed pink, dressed in their best, drilled in their behaviour, and sent down to the drawing room to spend a short formal interval with their parents. There they are expected to be clean, charming, obedient, and above all quiet, on display like the good ornaments they are, before being returned upstairs to the nursery when the hour is up. Affection is real but measured out in these careful doses, and a great deal of the age's parenting is done at arm's length by proxy. The food fits the philosophy exactly: plain, wholesome, and profoundly boring. Nursery meals mean bread and milk, thin porridge, rice pudding, boiled mutton, and vegetables cooked into meek submission, all served on the theory that rich or spiced food would overexcite a young constitution. Treats are rare and sweetness suspect. The nursery table is a lesson in restraint served 3 times a day, and generations of Victorian children grow up on a diet designed less to delight than to build character through gentle culinary tedium. Discipline, too, is firm and unsentimental. Obedience is prized above nearly all things. Tempers are to be governed, and a wayward child is corrected without much fuss and often without much warmth. This is not cruelty mostly. It is a genuine belief that a child is clay to be shaped, that indulgence spoils, and that a well-ordered childhood of routine and restraint produces a well-ordered adult. Whether it produced happy adults is a question the era does not much pause to ask. Ever grown up loved from a distance, raised day to day by someone your parents paid? Countless Victorian children did exactly that, and remembered their nannies with a tenderness that says a great deal about where the real work of raising them was done. It is a quiet, orderly, slightly lonely little world, this nursery at the top of the house. But the children are not, in fact, the only small residents up here, nor the only ones who treat this house as home. Let's meet the lodgers nobody invited, the ones behind the walls and under the floors. Now let's meet the household you didn't invite. Behind the wainscoting and beneath the floorboards lives a thriving population of rats, mice, cockroaches, and the beloved black beetle, all delighted by the warm kitchen and the endless crumbs. Mice patrol the pantry by night, cockroaches scatter when the candle appears, and rats, bold and disturbingly clever, treat the house as a shared tenancy. Households wage war with traps, cats, poison, and the occasional professional rat catcher, and the war is never truly won, only paused. You are, at all times, cohabiting with several species who consider your home theirs. Try not to think about it while you eat. Let's understand why they love it here so very much, because from a rat's point of view, this house is paradise. It is warm, thanks to all those fires you fought to light. It is generously stocked, thanks to a larder full of food and a kitchen that scatters crumbs and scraps with every meal. And it is riddled with cosy hidden highways, the gaps behind the panelling, the voids beneath the floors, the spaces inside the walls, all connecting into a private transit system where a rodent may travel the entire house, unseen, and emerge wherever supper is served. You built them a heated, catered, fully plumbed hotel, and they moved in gratefully. The mice are the small, persistent nuisance, patrolling the pantry after dark, gnawing into the flour and the sugar and the wax candles, leaving their unmistakable calling cards along the shelves. The cockroaches, the era's dreaded black beetles, own the kitchen by night, swarming the warm floor near the range and vanishing into the cracks the instant a light appears, so that a servant coming down early with a candle sees the floor itself seem to ripple and flee. They're hardy, numerous, and very nearly impossible to be rid of once they've settled in. The rats are another matter entirely, bold and clever and genuinely unsettling. They are large, they are strong, they can gnaw through wood and squeeze through astonishingly small gaps, and they carry disease and fleas wherever they roam. In the walls at night you hear them, the scuttling and scratching and gnawing of creatures going confidently about their business in the dark, treating your home as the shared property it has, from their perspective, always been. It is an uneasy thing to lie in a cold bed listening to the walls quietly rustle with life. So the household fights back on every front it can manage. There is the cat, of course, the oldest and best of the defences, earning its keep by the tail count of its victims. There are traps of every design, baited and set along the runs. There is poison laid in the corners, a hazard to everyone but deployed anyway in desperation. And for a serious infestation there's the professional rat catcher, a colourful character who arrives with his terriers and his ferrets and his tricks, clears out what he can, and cheerfully warns you the survivors will breed the losses back within the season. Because that is the truth of it. The war is never won, only fought to a standstill. Kill a dozen and more arrive from next door, from the sewers, from the streets, drawn by the same warmth and food that drew the first. The best the household can do is keep the numbers down, guard the larder, set the traps, feed the cat, and make an uneasy peace with the fact that it shares its walls with a great many other tenants who pay no rent and give no notice. Ever tried to enjoy your dinner knowing full well what's watching from the skirting board? The Victorian did, nightly, and simply learned not to dwell on it. And speaking of things best not dwelt upon, when one of these lodgers or one of these meals finally makes you ill, you'll be reaching for the family's medicines, which is where matters take a genuinely alarming turn. Should you fall ill, and you will, Let's peek into the family medicine cabinet, a collection best described as optimistic. Here sits laudanum, a tincture of opium poured freely for coughs, aches, nerves, and, alarmingly, to quiet, fussy babies. Beside it lurks calomel, a mercury compound cheerfully prescribed for nearly everything, whose side effects included losing your teeth. There are patent tonics promising to cure all ailments known to man, containing mostly alcohol, opium, and confidence. The doctor, if summoned, may bleed you, blister you, or recommend a nice sea voyage. Victorian medicine meant well, tried hard, and occasionally treated you to death with tremendous sincerity. Let's start with laudanum, because it is everywhere, and it is genuinely frightening in hindsight. This is opium dissolved in alcohol, sold cheaply over the counter to anyone who asks, and taken by respectable people for every complaint under the sun. A cough, a headache, a sleepless night, a case of nerves, a painful monthly, a general sense of being unwell. It works in the sense that opium reliably dulls pain and worry, and it is dangerously addictive in the sense that opium reliably is. Whole households come to depend on it without ever thinking of themselves as anything but sensible patients managing their ailments. The truly grim chapter is the dosing of infants. There are soothing syrups sold expressly for fretful, teething babies, and a great many of them are quietly laced with opium, given to quiet a crying child so an exhausted mother or an overworked minder can get some rest or some work done. They do quiet the child, sometimes permanently, and the era's infants pay a hidden toll for the convenience that no one is properly counting yet. It is one of the darker things done with the best of intentions in a home that loves its children. Then there's calomel, the great mercury standby, prescribed with cheerful abandon for fevers, sluggish digestion, and complaints of every kind. Mercury is a poison, and the treatment produces exactly the effects of poisoning, purging the patient violently and with repeated use, loosening the teeth and blackening the gums, so that the cure announces itself in the very mouth of the cured. The doctors of the day genuinely believe this drastic purging is doing good, driving out the illness, and they administer it to adults and children alike with confidence and care. Beyond the doctor's prescriptions lies the vast glittering world of patent medicines, the bottled tonics and pills and cure-alls sold with magnificent advertising and no oversight whatsoever. Each promises to cure a startling range of unrelated diseases, and each contains, upon inspection, some blend of alcohol, opium, and cheerful nonsense. People buy them by the crateful, dosing themselves and their families on the strength of a confident label and a testimonial from a satisfied stranger, and the makers grow rich on hope bottled and sold at a handsome markup. And should a real doctor be summoned, the treatments on offer are their own adventure. There is bleeding, still clung to by some, drawing off the patient's blood to balance the body's supposed humours. There are blisters raised deliberately on the skin to draw out disease, poultices, purges, and the ever-popular recommendation of rest, fresh sea air, or a change of climate for those who can afford to flee their symptoms to the coast. Ever been prescribed a nice holiday for a serious illness? The wealthy Victorian frequently was, and it was often the least harmful thing on the menu. Medicine here is a strange mix of the tender and the terrifying, practiced by people trying genuinely hard with tools that range from the useless to the actively dangerous, all delivered with utter sincerity. You take your chances, you take your laudanum, and you hope. And while the physicians debate your humours, the wider world has its own confident theory of what makes you sick, and it concerns the very air drifting past your window. Let's step to the window and consider the air, because the Victorians certainly did, with dread. The prevailing belief is in miasma, the idea that disease spreads through foul, smelly air rising from sewage, marshes and rot. It's not quite right, but given how the city smells, you can hardly blame them. Outside, coal smoke from 1,000 chimneys mixes with fog to form a thick, choking yellow-grey soup that coats the lungs and blots out the sun. Inside, the air is close, gaslit, and scented with damp and drains. Whether or not the smell itself causes the sickness is very real, and the air is doing you no favours either way. Let's understand the theory on its own terms, because it isn't stupid, merely mistaken. The idea is that disease rises as a kind of poisonous vapour, a bad air from decaying matter, stagnant water, sewage, and rot, and that breathing this foul-smelling exhalation is what makes people sick. Look at where illness clusters, the reasoning goes, and you find it thickest around the stinking slums, the reeking river, the overflowing cesspits, precisely where the air smells worst. Smell and sickness travel together, so smell must carry the sickness. It's a reasonable conclusion drawn from real observation, and it happens to be wrong about the mechanism while pointing straight at the true culprit. Because the places that smell of filth are indeed the places that make you ill, just not through the nose. The same foul water and sewage that produce the stench also carry the true agents of disease, and it will take a while yet, and some very determined investigation into how cholera actually spreads, before the world firmly grasps that it is the contaminated water, not the offended nostril, doing the killing. For now, miasma reigns, and it drives people to fear a bad smell as they would a loaded gun. This fear is not without its uses, oddly enough. Terrified of foul air, reformers push hard to clean up the sewage, drain the marshes, ventilate the buildings, and flush the filth away from where people live and breathe. Their reasoning is faulty, but their remedy is sound. Clear away the stink, and you clear away the sickness too, because you happen to be clearing away the real cause in the process. Sometimes the wrong theory, followed sincerely enough, stumbles onto the right answer. Meanwhile, the actual air, theory aside, is genuinely dreadful. Step outside and the great city greets you with its signature atmosphere, the coal smoke of countless chimneys mixed with river fog into a thick yellow-grey pall that stings the eyes, coats the throat, and dims the very sun at noon. On the worst days, this smog is so dense you can scarcely see across the street, and it settles into every chest, so that the wheeze and cough of the city is simply the background sound of life. It grimes the buildings black, and the washing on the line, and of course your lungs. Indoors is little better, only differently bad. The windows stay shut against the cold and the smog, sealing you in with the close, stale, gaslit air, the damp rising from the walls, the faint drift from the drains, and the general muggy fug of many people and many fires in an underventilated house. You are breathing bad air whichever side of the glass you choose, and the era's instinct to fling open a window for health runs headlong into the era's reality that the air out there is a soup. Ever lived somewhere where the outdoor air and the indoor air were competing to be worse for you? That's this house, in this city, in this smoke. The Victorians feared the air, and though they got the reason muddled, they were absolutely right to. Now let's look up from the window to the chimney it all pours from, and confront one of the quiet cruelties that keeps that chimney clean. Let's look up the chimney and confront one of the era's quiet cruelties. All these coal fires produce soot, and soot must be swept. And for far too long that job was done by climbing boys, small children, some barely past toddling, sent up the narrow flues to scrape them clean. They emerged black, coughing, scraped bloody by the brick, and prone to a terrible cancer that got its own grim nickname. Reformers fought for decades to ban the practice, and a fresh law had only just been strengthened around this time to protect them. Still, in many homes the memory was recent, and the chimney above your cosy fire held a darker story than the flames below it. Let's understand the problem the trade existed to solve, because it's real enough. Coal fires cake the inside of a chimney with thick, greasy soot, and a fouled chimney draws poorly, smokes into the room, and can catch fire in a sudden roaring blaze that threatens the whole house. So chimneys must be swept regularly, and the flues in these houses are often narrow, twisting and awkward, bending around corners a brush cannot easily follow. And here the trade found its monstrous solution: send a child up inside. The climbing boys, and occasionally girls, were small precisely so they would fit, and they were often desperately young, apprenticed or sold to a master sweep who sent them scrambling up the black, cramped, pitch-dark flues to scrape and brush the soot loose from within. They climbed by, bracing their small backs, knees and elbows against the brick, working upward in a space barely wider than their bodies, in the dark, choking on the falling soot, their skin torn raw on the rough stone. It is a horror to picture, and it was ordinary, contracted work in respectable households for a very long time. The suffering did not end when they climbed down. The soot ground into their scraped skin and never fully washed out, and it caused a dreadful disease, a cancer so associated with the trade that it was named for the sweeps themselves, one of the first occupational cancers ever recognised. The children's growth was stunted, their lungs ruined, their knees and elbows permanently calloused and deformed from the climbing. Some became trapped in a flue and suffocated or burned. They were, in every sense, used up by the work. Reformers fought this for decades, appalled, pushing law after law through a reluctant system. Sweeping machines existed, long jointed brushes that could clean a flue without a child inside it, and the campaigners urged their use, but many masters resisted, insisting the boys did it better and cheaper, and enforcement was weak enough that the practice dragged on long after it was first condemned. It took repeated legislation, each act stronger than the last, and a great deal of stubborn public conscience, before the climbing boys were finally truly gone from the chimneys of the land. By our year the tide is turning hard against it, the law freshly strengthened, the machines spreading, the public increasingly disgusted. But turning is not the same as done, and in many a comfortable home the sweep's boy is a memory only a few years old, or in the worst corners still a present shame. The cosy fire warming your parlour, the cheerful flames you were so grateful for this morning, sit at the bottom of a flue that, not long ago, a frightened child was sent up to clean with his own scraped body. Ever felt a chill looking at something warm and pleasant, once you knew what kept it working? That's the chimney. It's a good corrective, honestly, against romanticising any of this. Now let's step back into the daylight world of the family and its rituals, where the cruelties are subtler and the weapons are, of all things, small pieces of card. Let's brave the social battlefield of the calling card. Now let's brave the social battlefield, ruled by tiny pieces of card. Paying a call on a neighbour is governed by a bewildering code. The right hours, the right cards, the corners folded just so to signal your meaning, the precise number of minutes you may linger before overstaying. Leave a card and the household decides whether to receive you, ignore you, or return the gesture, and every choice carries weight. Get the rules wrong, and you're not merely rude, you're revealed as someone who doesn't know the rules, which is far worse. It's an entire silent language of paper and timing, and everyone around you learned it in the cradle while you're improvising in a panic. Let's start with the card itself, because it is a small object carrying an enormous burden. It's a slip of stiff paper or thin card bearing your name, printed in a style precisely calibrated to be tasteful rather than showy, because a vulgar card announces a vulgar person. You carry a supply in a special little case, and you present or leave them according to rules that everyone of standing simply knows and no one ever explains. The card is your representative, your proxy, your polite ambassador, and it says a great deal about you before you've spoken a word. Now the ritual of the call, which is choreographed to the minute. You arrive during calling hours, that narrow acceptable window in the afternoon, and you present your card to the servant at the door. That servant then vanishes to consult the mistress of the house, who now holds all the power, for she may decide she is at home and will receive you, or that she is not at home, a polite and universally understood fiction meaning she would rather not thank you. You may be shown in, or you may be left standing on the step gently and deniably rejected by a phrase everyone knows to be a lie. If you are received, the visit itself is brief and bounded, a short quarter of an hour of careful, pleasant, weightless conversation before you rise and leave, because lingering is a sin and overstaying marks you as someone who cannot read the invisible clock. If you are not received, you leave your card, and the whole exchange becomes a slow correspondence conducted in paper, for the household is now obliged to return your call in kind, and if they fail to, the message is unmistakable and cutting. Then there's the folding, a refinement so delicate it borders on cryptography. The corners of a card may be turned down to convey particular meanings, that you called in person rather than sending a servant, that the call was one of condolence or congratulation, that it was meant for the whole household rather than one lady of it. Each fold is a small signal in a code the initiated read at a glance, and each carries the risk of a blunder that says precisely the wrong thing to precisely the wrong person. The cruelty of the whole system is that it is designed as much to exclude as to connect. It sorts the world neatly into those who know the rules and those who don't, and the not knowing is unforgivable in a way that ordinary rudeness never is. A newcomer, or someone risen in the world, can be word perfect in courtesy and still betray themselves with a single misjudged card, revealing that they were not, after all, born to this. Ever walked into a room where everyone knew a game you'd never been taught? That's the position of anyone climbing into this world from below. So you juggle your little case of cards, mind your hours, count your minutes, and pray you've folded the right corner. And having survived the call, you may find yourself invited to stay for the next great genteel ordeal, an occasion that looks like pure relaxation and is in fact a quiet examination poured from a pot. Let's take tea. From calling we drift naturally to tea, that most civilized looking of quiet minefields. Afternoon tea arrives with delicate sandwiches, small cakes, and an arsenal of specialized implements, each with a correct and incorrect use. You must hold the cup properly, stir without clinking, and never ever commit the sin of an extended pinky or a slurp. Conversation stays light and safe. Strong opinions are as unwelcome as spilled milk. Behind the gentility runs a constant hum of observation, everyone quietly noting who knows the form and who doesn't. It looks like the most relaxing hour imaginable, and it is in fact a genteel examination you didn't study for. Let's set the scene first, because it is genuinely lovely to look at. The tea things are brought out in the late afternoon to bridge the long hungry gap before a fashionably late dinner. A pot under a cosy thin cups on saucers, a jug of milk, a bowl of sugar with its own small tongs, and a tiered stand bearing the treasures of the occasion. On the lower plates sit dainty sandwiches, crusts trimmed away, cut small and thin and filled with cucumber or egg or potted meat. Above them wait the scones and the small cakes and the sweet things, arranged with care, the whole display a small edible argument for the household's refinement. Now the perils, which are numerous and hidden. There is a correct way to hold the cup, fingers through the handle just so, and an incorrect way that marks you at once. There is a correct way to stir, gently in a small movement. without letting the spoon clang against the porcelain like a fire bell. There is the matter of the extended little finger, which one might think elegant and which is in fact a dead giveaway of someone trying too hard. And there is the absolute unforgivable sin of the audible sip, the slurp, which no amount of good breeding can excuse. Ever sipped a drink and felt an entire room silently grading you on it? That is afternoon tea. The great ceremonial question, debated with real feeling, is the order of milk and tea, whether the milk goes into the cup first or the tea, a matter that sounds trivial and carries, absurdly, genuine social weight, hinting at your origins and your understanding of the proper way of things. It is the sort of question over which people quietly judge one another for a lifetime, and there is no answer safe from someone's disapproval, only the confidence to pour as though you have always known. The conversation is as carefully bounded as the cutlery. Tea talk is light, pleasant, and scrupulously safe, kept well away from anything that might provoke, unsettle, or reveal too much. Politics, religion, money, and strong feeling of any kind are all left firmly at the door. You speak of the weather, of mutual acquaintances handled with care, of small agreeable nothings, because the purpose of the hour is not to say anything, but to demonstrate that you know how to say nothing gracefully, for a sustained period, without a single misstep. And underneath the whole gentle scene runs that constant current of observation, everyone watching everyone with perfect politeness, noting the hold of the cup, the choice of words, the ease or unease of every gesture. It is a performance of belonging staged over sandwiches, and the stakes, though never spoken, are real, for reputations are quietly made and unmade over the teacups by people smiling warmly the entire time. The warmth is genuine and the scrutiny is genuine, and they sit side by side in the same room. So you hold your cup just so, stir in silence, keep your opinions blandly to yourself, and survive the examination one careful sip at a time. And if you have passed the small daytime test of card and tea, you may earn the greatest social trial the household can offer, the one held after dark, under the gaslight, arrayed with a small gleaming army of forks. Let's go into dinner. As evening falls, we reach the grand ordeal, dinner. A formal Victorian dinner marches through course after course, and beside your plate awaits a gleaming regiment of cutlery, each piece assigned to a specific dish in a specific order. Work from the outside in, use the fish knife for the fish, and whatever you do, don't reach for the wrong glass. Servants circle with dishes, timing is everything, and the mistress has agonized over the menu and seating for days, because a well-run dinner announces the family's worth to every guest at the table. Choose wrong and no one shouts. They simply notice and remember. It is a meal, a performance, and a test, all balanced on the tines of the correct fork. Let's survey the table because it is a battlefield laid with silver. Beside each place sits an intimidating array of implements, forks to the left, knives and spoons to the right, more waiting above the plate, each shaped and sized for one specific task and useless for any other. There is a knife for the fish, and a different knife for the meat, a fork for this and a fork for that, spoons for soup and spoons for pudding, and the whole gleaming regiment must be used in the right order for the right course. The rule that saves you is simple: work from the outside in, and the panic that ruins you is forgetting it. Now the march of courses, for a formal dinner is a long campaign rather than a single meal. It opens with soup, then fish, then a procession of meats and made dishes and roasts, then sweet things and savoury things and fruit, each brought and cleared in its turn, each with its own cutlery and its own etiquette. You're expected to take a little of each, to pace yourself across the long parade, and to keep up the flow of light, pleasant conversation the entire time, all while navigating the silverware without a single visible hesitation. It is a marathon disguised as a pleasure. The service itself is an art performed by the servants, who move around the table presenting each dish so that guests may serve themselves, refilling glasses, clearing plates and vanishing between courses, ideally noticed as little as the gaslight. The timing must be exact, the dishes arriving hot and in sequence from a kitchen 2 floors below, which means the cook and the servants have been labouring in that furnace all day, so that the meal may appear upstairs as though summoned effortlessly from the air. The effortlessness is the whole illusion, and it is bought with a great deal of hidden sweat. Behind it all stands the mistress of the house, who has agonised over this dinner for days, because the dinner is her work and her verdict both. She has planned the menu to impress without seeming to try, arranged the seating so that rank and precedence and delicate personal histories all fall out correctly, and staked the family's standing on whether the evening runs smooth, get the seating wrong, place a guest below their due, and you have delivered a public insult that will be remembered long after the last plate is cleared. And the judgment is real, though it never raises its voice. Reach for the wrong fork, drink from your neighbour's glass, falter over the fish, and no one will correct you or say a word. They will simply see and file it away and know. Ever sat at a table so precisely governed that a single small mistake felt like a public confession? The Victorian dinner is exactly that, a gracious, glittering, merciless examination where the failing grade is delivered in perfect silence and perfect smiles. You survive it fork by fork, course by course, and rise from the table drained by the effort of appearing at ease. But the evening is not over, for the guests must now be entertained. An entertainment in this house means gathering in the drawing room for pastimes of a peculiar and captive charm. Let's retire for the parlour games. Dinner survived. The family retires for an evening of home entertainment, because there is no television, and something must fill the hours. This means the piano, at which some daughter of the house has been drilled for years, and now performs for a captive audience that must look enraptured. There are songs around the instrument, readings aloud, card games, and parlour games of the slightly unhinged variety, including one played by snatching raisins from a dish of flaming brandy. Amusement is homemade, communal, and entirely reliant on everyone agreeing to be a good sport. It's genuinely charming, and, after the 9th verse of the same ballad, genuinely testing. Let's begin at the piano, the beating heart of the domestic evening, and the centrepiece of the parlour. A young lady of good family is expected to be accomplished, and accomplishment means, above all, music. So she has practised for countless dull hours to reach this moment of performing before the assembled company. She plays, she perhaps sings, and the audience is expected to sit in attentive delight, applauding warmly, requesting more, and betraying not a flicker of the restlessness that sets in somewhere around the 3rd selection. The performance is as much about displaying her upbringing as about the music, and everyone understands this and plays their part. Then there is the singing together, the whole company gathered around the instrument to work through the popular songs and sentimental ballads of the day, sheet music propped up and voices raised in various states of tunefulness. These songs run long, verse after verse of earnest melody about love and loss and home and mother, and the company sings them through to the bitter end because that is what one does. It is warm and companionable, and, by the 9th verse of a particularly devoted ballad, a small test of the human spirit's capacity for endurance. Beyond music lie the games, and here the air reveals a streak of delightful strangeness. There are the gentle amusements, charades, and guessing games and word games and cards, at which the company competes with mannerly good humour. And then there are the games that suggest the Victorians harboured a hidden appetite for danger, chief among them the one where raisins are set in a dish of brandy, the brandy is lit, and the players must snatch the flaming fruit out with their bare fingers and pop them, still burning, into their mouths. It is a party game built around grabbing fire, and they adored it. Ever played a game whose central rule was essentially catch the flames? The Victorians did by choice for fun in the parlour. There are quieter pastimes too, for not every evening burns. There are readings aloud, one member of the family working through a novel or a poem while the others listen and sew or sit. The shared book a genuine pleasure in an age that reads aloud as naturally as it breathes. There are riddles and recitations, tableaux, where the company freezes into living pictures of famous scenes, and endless rounds of conversation games that reward wit and quickness. The whole evening is assembled from the talents and the willingness of the people in the room. And that is the true engine of it all, the shared agreement to be entertained and entertaining, to take one's turn, to applaud the performer and endure the ballad and grab the flaming raisin with a good grace. The amusement is homemade because it must be, and it works only because everyone consents to make it work, contributing their party piece and receiving everyone else's in kind. It is communal in the deepest sense, a pleasure the family manufactures together out of nothing but a piano, a pack of cards, some brandy, and their collective goodwill. It is, for all the tedium of the 9th verse, one of the genuinely warm corners of this cold and rule-bound house. And at the centre of that warmth, orchestrating the whole evening as she orchestrates everything, stands the woman the ages placed upon a peculiar pedestal. Let's consider the mistress of the house, the angel who runs it all. Let's pause on the woman running all of this, the mistress, cast in the role the age adored, the angel of the house. She's expected to be gentle, selfless, endlessly patient, and devoted entirely to the comfort of her husband and the moral tone of her home. She manages the servants, plans the meals, keeps the accounts, upholds the family's respectability, and does it all while appearing to do nothing more strenuous than embroidery. Her domain is the home, and only the home. Ambition beyond it is quietly discouraged. It is an exhausting amount of invisible labour dressed up as serene domestic bliss, and she is not permitted to look tired while performing it. Let's examine the ideal she's meant to embody, because it is a demanding one dressed as a gentle one. The age holds up a vision of womanhood that is pure, patient, self-sacrificing and devoted, a moral centre for the home who soothes her husband, guides her children, and radiates a calm virtue that keeps the whole household spiritually sound. She is to be the still point in the family's world, asking nothing for herself, offended by nothing, tired by nothing, forever gentle and forever giving. It is less a description of a woman than a portrait of a domestic saint, and real women are expected to live inside it. Now the reality behind the halo, which is a formidable quantity of work. The mistress runs the household as a manager runs a business, and the business is complex. She hires and directs the servants, settling disputes and correcting faults, and keeping the whole staff to their tasks. She plans the meals, orders the provisions, keeps the household accounts and watches the spending, oversees the cleaning and the laundry and the endless maintenance, and manages the family's entire social life of calls and cards and dinners. It is genuine executive labour, and the era's great domestic manuals are thick with instruction precisely because so much rests on her doing it well. Yet she must perform all this while appearing to do nothing of the kind. The illusion the household sells to the world is one of effortless ease, a home that simply runs, a comfort that simply exists, a mistress at leisure with her needlework while everything hums along by itself. The immense coordinating effort behind that ease must stay invisible, so she carries her ledgers and her staffing troubles and her 1,000 small decisions privately, presenting to guests and husband a face of untroubled serenity. Ever done a demanding job and been required to look as though you weren't working at all? That is her daily condition. Her horizon, meanwhile, is drawn tight around the house and permitted to extend no further. The world of work, ambition, public life, and independent achievement belongs to men, and a woman who reaches toward it strains against the whole weight of the age's expectations. Her sphere is domestic, her influence indirect, exercised through her husband and her home rather than in her own name, and even her considerable real power over the running of the household is framed always as service rather than authority. She governs a small kingdom, and is told she merely keeps a home. There is real fulfillment in it for many, and real constraint in it for many, often in the same woman at the same time. The role offers a genuine domain to master, and a genuine dignity in mastering it, and it also offers a ceiling low enough that a clever, energetic, ambitious woman may spend her life managing a household when she might have managed a great deal more. The angel of the house is honoured and confined by the very same idea, elevated onto a pedestal that is also, if you look closely, a rather small and well-appointed cage. She presides over the whole visible house, but she is not the one who scrubs it into being. For that, we must go where she directs but rarely follows, down past the green baize door into the world that makes her serene household possible. Let's descend at last into life below stairs. Now let's go where the family rarely does. Below stairs, the servants' world. Down here the day begins before dawn and ends long after the family sleeps, in a life measured out in bells that summon you upward at a moment's notice. Servants eat plainer food, sleep in the coldest rooms, and are expected to be near invisible, pressing themselves to the wall as their betters pass. There are rigid hierarchies even among them, from the lofty cook and butler down to the lowly scullery maid with her chapped hands and mountain of pots. It is hard, endless, poorly paid work, and yet for many it means a roof, food, and a place in a world with few kinder options. The house has two entirely separate lives, and only one of them gets to sit in the parlour. Let's understand the divide first, marked by an actual door. In a house of any size there is a threshold, often a green baize door that muffles the sound, separating the family's polished world above from the working world below, and crossing it is like passing between two countries sharing one address. Below it lie the kitchen, the scullery, the servants' hall, the storerooms, and the back stairs, a whole hidden domain where the labour happens, and above it lies the serene, ornamented life that labour makes possible. The two worlds share a roof, and almost nothing else. Now the shape of the servant's day, which is bounded only by exhaustion. It starts before dawn, when the lowest maids rise in the dark and cold to rake and light the fires, and heat the water so that the family may wake to warmth they never see created. It ends only when the last of the family has retired, and the last task is done, often late into the night, leaving a few short hours of sleep before it all begins again. Through it all runs the tyranny of the bell system, the board of labelled bells in the kitchen that jangle to summon a servant to any room at any moment, so that one is never truly off duty, only waiting to be rung for. The hierarchy below stairs is as rigid as anything above it, a whole ladder of rank among people the family lumps together as simply the servants. At the top stand the senior figures, the butler and the housekeeper and the cook, who command real authority and their own small dignities. Beneath them descend the footmen, the housemaids, the kitchen maids, and at the very bottom the scullery maid, youngest and lowest, whose life is the endless scrubbing of pots and pans in cold water with cracked and reddened hands. Each rank knows its place precisely, and the ordering is observed among the servants with a seriousness that would surprise the family, if the family ever thought about it. The invisibility is perhaps the strangest demand of all. A good servant is meant to be present in the work and absent in the person, appearing where needed and effacing themselves everywhere else, even to the point of turning to face the wall or stepping into a doorway when the family passes so as not to intrude upon their notice. They are to move through the house like the machinery they're treated as, keeping everything running while being seen as little as possible, so that the family may enjoy the comfort without ever confronting the human cost of it. Ever done essential work while being asked to pretend you weren't there? That is the servant's whole art. And yet, for all its hardness, this life is chosen, because the alternatives are often worse. Domestic service offers a poor girl or boy a roof over their head, food in their belly, a fire nearby, and a measure of security and respectability that the factory or the field or the street cannot match. The pay is small, the hours are all of them, the freedom is scant, and still there is a bed and a meal and a place, and in this world that counts for a very great deal. It is a hard bargain, and for many it is the best one on offer. 2 lives under one roof then, and the one below keeps the one above afloat. And both of those lives, high and low alike, share one thing they cannot escape and cannot delegate, one visitor who crosses the green baize door and every other threshold without knocking. Let's speak gently of death. Let's speak softly now of death, which visits the Victorian home often and openly. People die at home, in their own beds, surrounded by family, and the body remains in the house to be washed, dressed, and watched over until burial. Curtains are drawn, clocks may be stopped, mirrors covered, and the household hushes itself into solemn ritual. Child mortality is heartbreakingly common, and disease can carry off the young and strong in a matter of days. There is no hiding death away in distant institutions. It is part of the household's rhythm, mourned with elaborate and sincere ceremony. The Victorians did not fear to look death in the face, largely because it kept turning up at the door. Let's begin with how close it all is, because that is the great difference from our own time. Death happens here, in this house, in the familiar bed, not in some distant ward attended by strangers. When a person's time comes, they die at home among their family, and the family is present for it, gathered at the bedside through the final hours, so that dying is a shared and witnessed event rather than a hidden one. The deathbed is a scene the era knows intimately, and there is even a strong sense of what makes a good one, a passing met calmly, with the family near and the affairs in order. Then the body remains, and the household tends it. There is no swift removal by professionals. Instead, the dead are washed and dressed with care by the family or the women who help them, and laid out at home to be watched over until the burial. The room is kept, the body kept with it, and the family sits with their dead through the days between, a practice of watching and waiting that keeps the departed present and cared for rather than whisked away. It is tender and unflinching, and utterly ordinary to them. The house itself is put into mourning through a set of quiet, powerful gestures. The curtains are drawn against the daylight, hushing the rooms into a dim solemnity. The clocks may be stopped at the hour of death, holding the moment. The mirrors are turned or covered with cloth, and the whole household lowers its voice and its pace into a stillness that announces, to anyone who enters, that death is present here and is being honoured. These small acts transform the ordinary home into a place of mourning, marked and set apart for the duration. The sorrow is so frequent because death is so frequent, and nowhere more cruelly than among the children. Child mortality is dreadfully high, and few families are spared the loss of a little one, so that the small coffin is a grief the era knows far too well. Disease, too, moves swiftly and without mercy, and the fevers and infections of the age can take a strong young adult from health to the grave in a handful of days, leaving no time for anything but shock. Death here is not the distant end of a long life. It is a near and constant presence that may call on anyone, at any age, with little warning. And because it is so present, the Victorians do not look away from it as we so often do. They face it directly, ritualize it thoroughly, and fold it into the ordinary rhythm of the household, rather than banishing it to the edges of life. There's a strength in this, a refusal to pretend death away, an acceptance that it belongs to the family story and must be met, honoured and mourned openly rather than hidden. Ever lived in a world that met death face to face instead of hurrying it out of sight? That was theirs, of necessity and by conviction both. And from this open acceptance of death flows an entire elaborate culture of grief, worn upon the body and governed by rules as strict as any that rule the dinner table. Let's look now at the long, black, carefully regulated business of mourning. From death flows an entire economy of grief and a strict dress code to match. A widow is expected to enter deep mourning, swathed in dull black crepe, shunning shiny fabrics and bright jewellery, sometimes for 2 full years, easing only slowly into greys and muted purples. There are rules for how long to mourn a husband, a parent, a child, a cousin, all carefully understood by everyone around you. Jet black jewellery becomes fashionable precisely because it is properly sombre, and whole shops exist to outfit the bereaved from head to veiled toe. Grief here is deeply felt and also carefully performed, worn on the body for all to see and judge. Mourning is not merely private sorrow, it is a public duty with a very specific wardrobe. Let's start with the widow, on whom the rules fall heaviest and longest. When a woman loses her husband, she enters the deepest mourning, and deep mourning has a precise uniform, a dress of dull black wool trimmed in black crepe, that particular crimped, lightless fabric chosen because it cannot shine, and so cannot suggest any lingering vanity or joy. She wears no bright colour, no glinting jewellery, no ornament that catches the eye, and often a heavy black veil that hides her face from the world. She is to be a walking figure of sorrow, and she may remain so, by the strictest custom, for a very long stretch of time indeed. The mourning then eases, but only slowly and by stages, according to a well-understood timetable. From the deepest black, dulled and craped, the widow moves in time to second mourning, where the crepe lessens and a little more is permitted, and then at last to half mourning, where the sombre black gives way to greys, soft mauves and muted purples, the colours of grief fading toward ordinary life. Each stage has its proper duration and its proper dress, and to move through them too fast is to seem heartless, while to linger too long is its own kind of statement. And every relationship has its own required period, all mapped out in a shared social knowledge. A husband is mourned longest and most deeply, a parent, a child, a sibling, and on down to the distant cousin. Each carries its expected span of black and its expected easing, so that one might be in mourning for one relative or another for large portions of a life. Everyone around you knows these periods too, and reads your dress as a precise report of your loss and how recently it fell, so that the wardrobe becomes a kind of public ledger of the family's griefs. From all this rises an entire industry, for so much regulated sorrow must be supplied. There are warehouses and shops devoted expressly to mourning, stocked with the black crepe and the black gowns and every sombre accessory the bereaved could require, ready to outfit a grieving household at short notice from head to veiled foot. There is mourning jewellery And here the age's love of jet comes in, that deep black stone polished into brooches and beads and lockets, precisely because it is properly dark and lustreless, sometimes woven together with a lock of the dead one's own hair, so that grief is worn literally upon the body, and so mourning becomes both true feeling and required performance at once, inseparably. The sorrow is real, often profound, and the elaborate customs give it shape and dignity and a way to be carried through the world. Yet the same customs make grief a public duty policed by watchful eyes, so that a widow must not only feel her loss but display it correctly, in the right fabric for the right span, or face the quiet judgment of everyone who knows the rules. Ever been required to prove your sorrow was sincere by dressing it exactly right, for exactly long enough? The Victorian mourner was precisely. The black is heavy, and the day at last is nearly done. So let us set aside the crape and the veils and turn toward rest, toward the closing ritual of a cold house, at the end of a long day, the small warm mercy that sends the household to its beds. Let's warm the sheets and bid the day good night. As the household winds down, let's prepare for the great nightly challenge, getting into a freezing bed. Someone fills a long-handled warming pan with hot coals or embers and slides it between the icy sheets, sweeping it back and forth so you don't climb into what feels like a snowdrift. You pull on a nightgown and a nightcap, not for charm but for survival, because a covered head loses less heat, and the bedroom fire, if there even is one, is already dying. Candles are snuffed, prayers are murmured, and the family retreats to their cold rooms one by one. The bed, warmed for a precious few minutes, is the closest thing to comfort the whole house offers, and you cling to it gratefully. Let's meet the hero of the hour, the warming pan, a genuinely clever little device. It's a flat-covered metal pan on a long handle, and into it go hot coals or glowing embers taken from the fire, and then it is slipped beneath the covers and swept steadily back and forth across the sheets to drive the deep chill out of the linen before a body lies down in it. Done well, it turns an icy bed into a merely cool one, which in this house counts as a triumph. There's a knack to it, a constant motion so the heat spreads and nothing scorches, and a servant or a family member performs this small service as one of the last kindnesses of the day. The alternatives are much the same idea by humbler means. A stone or brick can be heated at the fire, wrapped in flannel, and tucked down at the foot of the bed to warm the feet, holding its heat for hours as it slowly cools. A stoneware bottle filled with hot water does the same office. Whatever the method, the goal is identical: to place a pocket of stored warmth into the cold bed so that the sleeper is not simply surrendering to the temperature of the room, which by now, with the fire dying, is scarcely better than the frozen air outside the window. Then comes the nightwear, worn not for any charm but strictly for survival. There's the long nightgown, layered and modest, and above all the nightcap, that soft cap pulled down over the head, which strikes us as quaint and served a plain purpose, for a great deal of the body's warmth escapes through an uncovered head in a cold room, and a capped head sleeps warmer. The whole ensemble is armour against the night's chill, and everyone in the house, from the master to the youngest child, dons their version of it before climbing in. The rituals of retiring follow their gentle order. The candles are snuffed or the lamps turned down, for light is not to be wasted and a flame left burning is a danger. Prayers are said, at the bedside or with the family gathered, a settling of the day and a commending of the household to safekeeping through the dark. And then the family disperses, each to their own cold bedroom, carrying a candlestick up the dark stairs, the little flame throwing shadows on the walls, each person alone at last with the day's fatigue and the night's chill, and the small warmed patch of bed waiting for them. That warmed bed, for its brief span, is very nearly the sweetest thing the house has to give. Ever climbed into a bed someone had warmed for you on a truly cold night and felt it as pure, undeserved luxury? In this house, it is exactly that. A few precious minutes of borrowed heat, and you burrow into it gratefully while it lasts, knowing the warmth will fade and the room will win by morning. But for now, for this moment, you are warm, and it is enough. The candle gutters, the prayers are murmured, and one by one the rooms fall dark. So let us follow the last of them, and stand for a final moment in the great cold house as it settles into the night around us. Let's turn out the last light, and so we come to the end of the day, with the house settling into darkness around you. The fires sink to embers, the gas jets are turned down, and the great creaking building ticks and groans as it cools. Below you, the last servant finally drags herself up to a frozen attic, having risen before you and outlasted you by hours. The arsenic sits quietly on the walls, the rats resume their patrol, and the fog presses against the windows like it's trying to get in. You lie in your slowly cooling bed, listening to a home that is beautiful and brutal in equal measure, kept upright by hidden hands and unspoken rules. Tomorrow it will all begin again exactly the same, and you will survive it exactly as they did. One cold morning, one lit fire, one stubborn heartbeat at a time. Let's listen to the house as it cools, because a Victorian home at night is never quite silent. The fires that roared all day sink to faint embers, and the warmth they gave leaks steadily out into the dark, so the building slowly surrenders its heat back to the winter it fought all day. The timbers tick and settle, the stairs creak with no one on them, the pipes knock, and the whole great structure seems to sigh and groan as it contracts in the cold. It is the sound of a house exhaling, and it goes on all night, a quiet, uneasy chorus for anyone lying awake to hear it. Let's spare a last thought for the one still working, the servant climbing at long last toward her bed. She rose in the black cold of the early morning, before any of the family stirred, and she has laboured through every hour of the day, and only now, when the household is finally abed, may she drag herself up the back stairs to a bare, freezing attic room to snatch a few hours' sleep before it all begins again. She was first up, and she is last down, every single day, and her reward is the coldest room in a cold house, and the certainty of doing it all tomorrow. Let's acknowledge the quiet menaces we've met still present in the dark. The beautiful green wallpaper sits on the walls, shedding its faint poison into the very air the sleepers breathe. Behind the skirting and beneath the floors the rats resume their confident patrol now that the household has fallen still, the house handed over to its uninvited tenants for the night. And outside the fog presses thick against the cold glass, that yellow-grey soup of smoke and damp seeming almost to lean against the windows as though seeking a way in, wrapping the whole house in its dim and choking embrace. Let's see the house whole now for what it truly is, this thing we've walked through room by room. It is genuinely beautiful, ornamented and orderly and proud, a monument to an age of enormous confidence and real achievement. And it is genuinely brutal, cold and sooty and hazardous, poisoned and infested and merciless, kept standing only by the ceaseless hidden labour of people the family scarcely sees, and by 1,000 unspoken rules that bind everyone within it. Both truths are the house, at once, the splendour and the suffering laced tightly together and impossible to pull apart, and tomorrow it will all begin again, unchanged. The same servant will rise in the same dark to light the same fires, the same cold will have to be beaten back, the same dust fought, the same rules obeyed, the same performance stage for the same watchful world. This is not a single day, but every day, a life lived on repeat in a house that demands the whole of you and gives back only what it must. And through all of it, the people who lived here endured, as people do, finding warmth and laughter and love in the cracks of a hard and rigid world, refusing to be ground down by it. So as you lie in your own bed tonight, warm without a warming pan, breathing air no one fears, safe from the arsenic and the fog and the bells, let the great cold house fade gently into the dark behind you. It ticks and settles and falls silent at last, its secrets kept, its hidden workers sleeping, its long day finally done, and you can let it go now and drift, one stubborn heartbeat at a time, into a rest far softer than any that house ever offered. So there you have it, a single day behind the doors of a Victorian home, survived from the frost on the morning window pane to the last dying ember in the grate. You woke in a room cold enough to see your own breath, splashed your face with water that had spent all night becoming ice, and laced yourself into an outfit that took 2 people and half the morning. You warmed yourself at a beast of a fire that had to be fed all day, ate breakfast beside a fish that stared back, and lived in beautiful rooms that were quietly poisoning you from the walls. You dodged the rats in the skirting, the lead in the sweets, the fumes in the lamplight, and the terrible, silent judgment of choosing the wrong fork. And through all of it, someone else was working. A girl of 14 rose before you in the freezing dark, blacked the grates, hauled the water, scrubbed the step, and answered every bell at a run, moving through the house like a rumour so that the family need never notice how their comfort was made. Behind the polished parlour and the serene mistress with her needlework lay an ocean of hidden labour, endless and thankless, keeping the whole beautiful fiction upright, one bucket, one fire, one scrubbed pot at a time. It was a hard world, and it did not pretend otherwise. Death called at the door often and openly. Children were lost with heartbreaking regularity, and the air itself, indoors and out, seemed faintly determined to do you in. And yet, through the cold and the soot and the 10,000 rules, people still gathered around the piano and sang the ballad to its 9th verse. They still snatched flaming raisins from the brandy and laughed. They still warmed one another's beds, sat with their dead, mourned their losses in careful black, and found, in the narrow cracks of a rigid life, real tenderness and real joy. Because that is the quiet marvel of it. History is grimy and freezing and frequently trying to kill you, but it is also proof that people are stubborn, resourceful, and unreasonably hopeful, refusing to be ground down even by a house that asks for everything. So tonight, as you settle into your own warm bed, with clean water a tap away and air you never once have to fear, maybe whisper a quiet thank you to the ones who came before, who lit the fires in the dark and scrubbed the steps at dawn, so that comfort, one cold morning at a time, could slowly become something we simply expect. They survived it, all of it, one lit fire, one stubborn heartbeat at a time, and now you can let the great cold house go. Let it tick and settle and fall silent behind you, its secrets kept, its long day done. Rest easy. You've earned a warmth they never knew.